Hi, class. Well, welcome to chapters 3 and chapters 4 with principles of management. Chapter 3 will get into the history of management. Historically, where did it come from? Why do we actually had to create a person or a unit which is considered management or manager early on when companies just started to grow? And then we'll get into chapter 4, which will talk about the external and internal organizational environments and corporate culture. So, the history of management, chapter 3. The learning objective basically we're going to understand the evolution of management, the theory itself. We're going to identify key contributors, which are the actual scientists behind the magic of why they think managers are supposed to manage and how they're supposed to manage. We're going to analyze organizational environments. How are they structured? A hierarchy or flattened hierarchy? Compare structures and cultures. Very important. Then we're going to evaluate modern trends. So early origins of management from the very beginning, the very first thing we did was writing and recording. We were keeping records. That was the when they were like when you were summarizing things. The early on, way back in the day, they actually would just write down things and say, "Hey, this is what we did for the day, and let's document what we've done." Then the Egyptians took it to the next level. Egyptians said, let's specialize. Let's show specialization and hierarchy. Let's show how the structure should be. I'm in charge, and you're next to me, and you talk to this person, and who reports to who. And then the Sun Tzu basically got into coordination and authority. Who's really in charge? Is management basically in charge of everything? Or are there certain levels? They started getting into that. And the Greeks and the Romans decided, let's think about corporations. How do we run an actual corporation? Let's explain that. The Italian Renaissance came about with the growth of trade. This ties into management. The growth of trade came about. The printing press spread knowledge. That was way back in the day, 1800s, maybe even before then, where they actually had printing press. They were sending out newspapers, mostly as flyers and leaflets, but they were spreading the word. That was their way of the beginning of creating management. And double entry accounting. They'd write down what actually transpired within their companies, how much they made, how much they didn't make. And then became the rise of corporations through the Italian Renaissance. The Industrial Revolution came about and we got into the division of labor. This is a theorist named Adam Smith. He said we need to divide people up based on what they do. A division of labor. So we're going to have the payroll people over here, maybe the human resources people over here. We'll have the assembly line people over here. Let's divide all that up, and that will determine how much we can pay them. Growth of factories came about. Industrial Revolution said, you know what, we need to make things on a massive, let's say massive basis. So we need to start making assembly lines. We need to make factories put out thousands and thousands of products. That came about. And because of all that, now we have a need for managers, which means we need someone that's going to run all that. We need one person in charge. If you got 1,000 workers within, let's say, the factory, who's in charge of who? And then advances in technology and transportation came about. Technology, and we can talk about it for days now with AI, but back in the Industrial Revolution, a little bit of technology kind of kicked in. And then people started thinking about the scientific approach to management. So Frederick Taylor, he theorized that efficiency and time is important. That was a study that he presented. If you're efficient and you do things in a certain time, then the company will make money. And then Gantt came in and said, well, scheduling it's all about scheduling and putting charts together and making sure people come and go when they're supposed to and get work done. And then Gilbreth, he said, you know what? I want to talk about motion and study, the way people move, how much they move, if they even need to move at all. That'd be another thing we can get into. And all this is in your textbook. Then other theories came about and said, you know what? Let's talk about the administrative and the bureaucratic management point. How do we actually structure all this? So Henry Foyle came about and said, here are the management principles. These are the guiding principles that I think, as a theorist, should be implemented to run companies. And then Max Weber said, you know what? I'm going to create kind of a bureaucracy. You know, the way things should be controlled and hierarchy and the folks you get to talk to and the policies and processes and systems that they need to go through. So Max Weber chimed in, and then formal rules and the hierarchy was created in terms of management. Human relations has to always be a pivotal point of any company. So the human relations movement came into play because you are managing human beings, and the human element of the company needs to come into play. So Elton Mayo said, you know what? What about worker motivation? Can we think about a way to motivate our workers so they'll be more, let's say, efficient and let's say productive and maybe happy? So Elton came about. He's another theorist that said, let's think about how we're going to motivate the workers. And then Bernard said, we should think about a way of incorporating or make a corporation, more of a cooperative element should be part of human relations. And then Follett came about and said, you know what? We're going to have a lot of people, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different dynamics occurring in the workplace. Has anyone thought about conflict resolutions? Well, I've got some ideas. And he came about and said, look, this is what I think we should do to resolve conflict within the workplace. And we know now, this is 2026, the amount of conflicts that can occur in the workplace based on the uniqueness of the workplace, the location of the workplace, and then the people who actually are included within the workplace. Contingency and systems management. Organization as open systems, which means we need a way to say that the system will continue, that the organization knows who did what and when things occurred. So when people transfer out or move on to other jobs, we do have some kind of contingency plans. And that's important. The environmental impact decision, are we going to be a green company? Are we going to be a company that cares about the environment? That's a factor as well. How does that play into the management scheme? And then non-universal management application, which means not everything is an easy fix. It's not universal. There's no universal management approach. So you had to think outside the box. You had to think of how you would actually manage things. When I was in the military, there was a way of saying it is done now, it needs to be done now, and there's no reason to debate it. That was a whole different way of running things. But that's not a universal way of running a company. There is time for reflection. There is time to sit back. Chapter one talked about it, and chapter two got into it a little bit. You have an opportunity to think of the, let's say, the model in which you're going to be driven by. You know, are you going to have a chance to have group activities, group decisions? So these are all the factors that need to come into play, especially when it comes to contingency and system management. All right, so chapter four it gets in a little bit more into now external and internal organizational environments and corporate culture. So we're shifting gears and getting into chapter four now. So the external environment basically is forces outside the organization. What is beyond the parameters of your walls of your organization that will occur that will affect the ins and out or the daily operations of your company? That needs to be considered. And then the impact, the strategies, and the structure. Is what you have in place going to be sufficient to move you forward in the next 10 years, 15 years, and so forth? We're thinking about that. That's the external environment. And then also include the economy, social and political. Right now, that's huge. If you were running Tesla right now, let's say you weren't Elon Musk, if you were maybe second in command or third in command, I think I'd be getting a little bit worried about the external forces that are going to make my company a lot weaker. If you notice when Elon Musk got involved with the let's say the president who was running for office, Trump, his ratings went down. It plummeted. His investments went down. His stocks in his own company plummeted because people said, look, this guy's going to have an issue. Because at first he was like, oh my God, you're the right hand man to the president. You helped him get elected. And then the president and Elon Musk, they butted heads. And before you know it, Elon Musk is out. The president is basically talking against him. And so that's a political ramification. That's something that's important. That's an external environment that's going to affect your company and the way you manage it. External forces also stable versus unstable environments. We are seeing that right now with the war with Iran. We have a very unstable economy, unstable environment. So how are we going to be managing our companies based on some of those, let's say, environmental factors? Industry conditions. Are things, let's say, up to speed or up to standard within your company? Okay, some of the external forces may say, no, it's not. You're going to need to make some changes. You're the manager. You have to make that happen. And then organizational adaptability. Are you able to adapt? In the military, we used to say we're going to adapt, overcome, and improvise when things came about. And that's what this question here is saying. Are you able to, your organization itself, do you have organizational adaptability? And that's talking about being able to pivot, shift, and do something different if the economy changes, if the political climate changes. So organizational structures, you got the the more mechanical versus the organic. Then you have structure, impacts, performance. We know that. And organizational and complexity. All of these are covered within your textbook. And I want you to dive into it. I'm just going to, again, give you a mini lecture, kind of a snapshot of what your chapter is going to be looking like. Types of structures: functional, divisional, matrix, geographic, networked teams, and virtual. The last one has come about in the last 10 to 15 years is everyone's doing virtual type of structures. And they found that it's been pretty effective. They've saved in labor costs, they've saved in overhead. Some companies don't even have a building to walk in to. Everything is done virtually, online, on the internet. Now that can work for a company and it can work against a company. Because if you have employees who are not productive, who are not meeting the deadlines, who are procrastinators, they may need that face-to-face manager that says, hey, let's get the job done. Get up your lunch hour. Hey, let's go ahead and stop taking those breaks. Get off your computer. Stop playing video games. So it's a lot to think about when you think about the structure of your company. Structure, advantages, and disadvantages. Well, functional, okay, is efficient versus silos. So functional, efficiency versus silos. Divisional, flexibility versus duplication. And the matrix is collaboration versus confusion. Those are some things to think about. The advantages and disadvantages, okay, that are related to the way you structure your company. Organizing for environment. Match structure to environment. I like that. That's a key thing. Something that someone did a while back. They said, why can't we just hold our business meetings or let's say our day-to-day operations on a beach? We'll take a desk out there and our laptops and all that. And that was just a experiment, in tolerance. Can the company tolerate employees going out there to the beach every day while the waves are coming in and they're getting work done? So you got to match your structure with the to the environment. Respond to opportunities and threats. That's part of the organization organizing for environment. And internal fit matters. And internal fit matters. Good example of that is Google. The way Google performs in a way that they actually take care of their employees, where they have actually, a chef, on staff 24/7 for the employees. They've got ping pong tables, pool tables, loud music. They created an environment that suits their employees. But that's not for every single company. Some companies can't function like that. We think about the corporate culture itself. Is it shared values and beliefs? Influence performance? It also influences performance is the culture itself, and it also must align with the environment. We have corporate social responsibility that came about in the last 20, 30 years after the Enron scandal and the Martha Stewarts of the world. And so the corporate culture is important because we want to make sure that we are in line with, the values and the policies and beliefs, of our government. So when people were, let's say, stealing money or creating fake books or fake accounts, that really took its toll on corporate America, and they changed the way that they do business. Types of culture: you got clan, adharchy, market, and hierarchy. So many things that can play into culture and types of culture. You have a market, the hierarchy, and so forth, and the clan. 21st century trends: inequities and social pressure, political tensions, environmental risk, and cyber threats. Again, we're in the 21st century. The cyber threats are real and they are scary. Right now, we have one of our community colleges here in San Diego that is completely shut down because they have a cyber threat. So the students cannot get on the actual websites to do their homework. They can't correspond with the professors. And so cyber threats are real. And any company, especially our college, is vulnerable to that. And so that's when you think about your structure and how you're going to be able to bounce back from all of that. Organizations as social enterprises. So organizations as social enterprises mean they're beyond profit, they're socially responsible, and I should say ethical expectations. So that's an organization as a social enterprise. So some of the key takeaways from chapters 1 and chapter 2 is management has evolved over time. Historically, there was ways that people thought management actually should function and some of the functions of management, and it's really evolved over time. The environment itself shapes the organization. If you work out of India, if you work out of New York, if you work out of Chicago, out of China, your environment will actually shape the actual organization. Structure and culture must align. We talked about that earlier in chapter 4. It must align with the actual culture. And then modern challenges require adaptability. Can you pivot? Can you shift? Can you do things a little different? Ladies and gentlemen, that was chapters 3 and chapter 4. Thank you for your time, and we will see you online.